doesn't wish for sunny days, that the sky above us would never turn gray. But life isn't always sunshine. We have times that leave us asking why. And when the clouds roll in and tears begin to fall, there must be a reason for it all.
Redeemer of the rain, the Lord will never waste our pain. He brings beauty out of brokenness and hope to our heartache, healing out of every hurt that invades our shattered world. We never walk through trials in vain. He's the Redeemer of the rain.
Every problem that we face is sifted by the Father through hands of grace. He uses sorrow to guide us, to call us closer to His side. It's
In the middle of the storm we learn to trust that He is always watching over us. Redeemer of the rain, the Lord will never waste our pain. He brings beauty out of brokenness and hope to our heartache, healing out of every hurt that invades our shattered world. We never walk through trials in vain. He's the Redeemer of the rain. Dark days we walk through.
dark days we walk
They
through.
lead a path for others, leading them to the Redeemer of the rain. He brings beauty out of brokenness and hope to our heartache, healing out of every hurt that invades our shattered world. We never walk through trials in vain. Oh, we know His mercy long enough to say, He's the Redeemer of the rain.
Thank you very much. I'm going to sing like that in heaven. But until then, I'll listen to those who have the talent. Do you know, it's interesting that God has blessed us all with talents. And I was reading that one of the talent that is often most wasted is the talent of time. And the king upon his throne and the pauper in the streets of India, we all have the same amount of time and what we do with that time. What I'm going to do in this class is I'm going to share my story of how I got into natural remedies because I was trained as a nurse. I was raised in a house where if you get sick, you go to the doctor. I never questioned it. It interested me that I was brought up in a home with a father who's an inventor, and we were taught to question everything, but we were never to question medicine. I now realise that that is not right. We should question every single thing Because as Nelson Mandela said, I am the captain of my ship. I'm the master of my destiny. I'm the one that chooses what I do and what I do not do. And I also stress to parents, when you have a sick child and you want to know what's wrong and you take this child to the doctor, and if the doctor's saying your child's got this and you must do this, you always smile. Do you know what smile sells? It's confidence. Thank you so much for your opinion. I'll seriously consider this. It's like when my son William got a fish hook in his thumb. Is he a boy? How do you get a fish hook out of a 9-year-old's thumb? So I went to the doctor, and the doctor put local anaesthetic in the thumb and then a tiny little cut, and was able to pull it out and bound it up. And then as I'm walking out with my son William, he said to me, is he up to date on his recent vaccinations? Da-da-da-da. I know you have to be careful because it is a responsibility of the health professionals to make sure you're looking after your child. Absolutely, we see that that's important in cases of child abuse. But unfortunately, some people see that if you are not giving the child these shots, it's almost equal to child abuse. I understand. They don't realise that last class I showed you. They didn't come to the class on the immune system and what an incredible body we live in and its inbuilt ability to heal. Do you know tetanus can only get a hold on the body if there's an element of horse organism, because horses carry tetanus. And if it's a wound that is deep, that it's healed on the outside and not the inside. Do you remember what God said in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7? I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, of love and a sound mind. And isn't knowledge power? Because I know that, I don't fear that my son will get tetanus, because I know what to do to that thumb. So when the doctor says, is he up to date in his vaccination? I need to be careful what I say. So I turned around and I smiled. You'll be amazed what a smile will do. I said, he's been immunised naturally. I'm a nurse. I'm also a natural therapist. If I'm concerned, I'll give you a ring. See the smile? And you leave quickly, because there's a whole waiting room out there. What do I mean by he's been immunised naturally? Do you know he gets sunshine every day? I make sure he drinks adequate water. He goes to bed early every night, so when his body's recharging and healing. And I have taught him to trust in God. I don't give him anything harmful. Yes, he breathes through his nose. I give him good food, moderation in the good things, and he exercises every day. Do you know they are the conditions that the body requires for healing? But how did I get to the point of that sort of confidence? I told you the story of when my first daughter, I was only 24, 6 weeks and 4 courses of antibiotics, and then the next child 2 years later, earache. I went to the old lady next door and she told me about the onion poultice. It was the first natural remedy I ever did. And when my son slept for 2 hours, what does that tell you? He's out of pain. I went down to the newsagent and bought a book with A, B, C, D, E, F, G in the middle, and under the earache, my first natural remedy. That was the beginning of my journey. About this time, my mother was very sick. She was a cripple in a wheelchair with rheumatoid arthritis. And she was deformed. Her hands were all like this. Her knees were twice the size of mine, and yet she was quite thin. We had gone to every medical procedure that you could think of, and yet Mum just got worse and worse and worse. And I met a lady. Friends next door introduced me to a lady named Daisy, and they said, Daisy does natural remedies. And I said, natural remedies? Because you're almost taught that they're quackery. And so I met Daisy, and she was the sweetest lady. She was in her 60s, I'm in my mid-20s. And I told her about Mum. I told her how now she was in a wheelchair, and yet she was only 50. And she said, I think I can help your Mum. She said, we just do simple natural remedies. Now, do you know what I knew? We'd gone to the end of the road with medicine. She'd been on prednisone, she'd even been on gold injections, but she was just getting worse and worse. And then what was really hard was when the doctor said she had to come off that medication now, and then she'd go through withdrawals. But still, we didn't question it. Still, we just had total trust. And I'd like to suggest we had total trust in a broken system. That's what we were taught to do. So Mum went up, and Daisy, little by little, got Mum off all her medications. Little by little, my Mum was now in no pain. This was my first, other than the earache, this was my first exposure to using natural remedies for more serious things. I thought, yeah, an onion for earache, but when you're really sick, you really have to go the medical. And then Mum was brought back home, and then we found it very difficult to handle her. We put her in hospital, and then the next morning the police knocked on our door. Mum had died in the night. She was only 51. But that experience changed my life, because here, only 6 weeks at this little old lady's place, who had got rid of all of her pain and all of her medication, but I think her body was just so broken. And I think Mum had just realised what is there for her now. The long road of building up her body once again so that she could function. In fact, at the funeral, so I'm one of 5 children, so I think I was 24, my brother was 26, my next sister down was 20, and then 18, and then 16, they were the ages. And at the funeral, Dad took us to a park, and he said to us, we thought we'd do the best with your Mum. He said, I've lost everything. We lost our house, he lost his business, everything, because it costs so much money. My dad, who's an engineer, who was in charge of a whole company, he was delivering fruit juices to doors and living in a rented house so that he could look after my Mum. And then my Mum passed. And I remember when Dad heard that Mum had passed, because the police told him to ring up, we were there. And he put the phone down and he said, it's all over. And I thought that was so apt. It's all over. What a journey it had been. It's all over for Mum. She's now in no pain. It's all over for Dad. It's all over for all of us. It's almost like an empty spot. But you know what? We had grieved already the loss of my Mum, the loss of the Mum that we knew. And after the funeral, Dad took us to a park and he said, I believe this was unnecessary, the journey we went through. He said, your Mum had a lot of emotional problems. She did not want to move. She did not want this. And he believes that it had manifested itself in the disease. He said, being at Daisy's, we all have had a glimpse on another way. And so he encouraged us, my dad, the inventor, he encouraged us to start pursuing another door that we had never pursued, which is medicine. Is medicine what heals our body? It actually isn't. It's the body that heals. And in the little book, The Ministry of Healing, in the chapter, The Physician, the Educator, the author says, let the physicians teach the people restorative power lies not in drugs. Drugs cannot heal you, but in nature. This body is the healer. An orthopedic surgeon said to me one day, said, we can set a bone, but we cannot heal that bone. And I think we all say, well, of course, but we don't often think of that in that light. And so I went back to my little home with my two little ones and continue the journey of discovering the conditions that the body needs for healing, because it was a totally new area for us. And it was about that time the neighbours said to me, have you ever thought of investigating to know God? And I was really challenged by this. In fact, I almost felt that she'd abused our relationship to go into that area with me. I said, no, thank you very much. But as life went on, my first husband had an affair, which broke my heart. And my friends next door came and prayed for me. And I loved the peace that prayer gave me. And I did not want to be influenced by anyone, so I began to read. I began to read the Bible. And I started at the beginning of the Bible, and I got to the point where if Aaron held Moses' hands up, they won the battle, the Israelites. But if his hands went down, they'd lose the battle, and I just thought, I don't know what this is all about. I just couldn't understand it. And then my friend gave me a book called Your Bible Anew. And this book explained how the Bible was written. I think there's 66 different authors. It also looked at how there is such harmony between everything that is said. And it also showed how God impressed the writers of the Bible. And it looked at the Dead Sea Scrolls that had been found in 1946 that confirmed that the Bible we have now is the original text. And then I came across a chapter called The State of the Dead. You see, I'm a fifth generation Australian Scottish descent, and I was taught in the Presbyterian Church as a child that when you die, you go to heaven or you go to hell. And it always used to puzzle me because they talk about a judgment day, and I thought, how come you go to heaven or hell when you die and then you have the judgment day? That's like going to prison, and at the end of your prison sentence you go to court. And what if in the court case they find out that actually you're innocent? And see, as a child, these things never made sense to me. They never made sense. And when I got to the chapter on the state of the dead, I started to read it, and it talked about how when you die, you sleep. And there's the story of the little girl. Her father came to Jesus and said, please come, my little girl, she's 12, she's dying, she's sick. And Jesus said, yeah, sure, I'll come. But he was delayed, people were around him the whole time, people wanted to touch Jesus, be near Jesus, and the little girl died. And one of the servants came and said, don't trouble the master anymore, the little girl has died. And Jesus said, no, I'll come, she's sleeping. And they said, no, excuse me, she's dead. Jesus said, no, she's sleeping. And they came to the house, and the morning party had already started where they wail, and Jesus sent them all out. And they went up to the little girl. Yeah, she was dead, but Jesus called the death sleep. And he said, little girl, arise. And she came back to life. And there are a few experiences similar to that where Jesus called the death asleep. And I've mentioned to you Psalm 146 a few times, verse 3, put not your trust in princes, neither in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath goes forth, he returns unto his earth. In that very day his thoughts perish. Wow, there's another verse. When you die, you go back to the earth. Your thoughts perish. You're not floating up to heaven. And have you ever been to a funeral where a man died and he was a drunkard and an abuser, and the preacher says, and now he's in heaven? I think, well, are they getting to heaven? And then there's the other theory of there's hell. And I know my first husband, he was brought up a Catholic, and when his father died at the age of 12, he was only 12 when his father died, they had to pray and pray to get the father out of purgatory and into heaven. And it was actually very cruel for these poor little children to have to keep praying that their father get out of the burning place. And that never made sense to me. And I remember I was in the car, and I read and I read and I read, and I thought, my mum's not floating around watching me. You see, when my first husband had the affair, I used to think, this must be so hard for mum. It must be so hard for mum to watch what I'm going through. But that's not what happens. The Bible says that when you die, you sleep. And in Ecclesiastes 9:5, it says the dead know nothing. They know nothing because they're asleep. And then there are the verses where it talks about Jesus coming again. And when he comes again, it says the dead in Christ shall rise. Why? Because they're all asleep in the grave. This brought me so much peace, because it's something that concerned me, that when I go through troubled times, it must be so hard for mum. And I thought, that doesn't even happen. We sleep. That is so much kinder. And so I read a little bit more, and I read about the health of the body and the importance of giving to God your body as a living sacrifice. In fact, it's found in Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. It says, I beseech you, it's an old word, it means I implore you, I ask you, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. So reasonable, because we're the ones that benefit when we live in a body that works. And then it says, be not conformed to this world. How do you get conformed to this world? Well, just go down the main street and look at what most people eat. Yeah, not real great. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So the renewing of your mind, this talks about when we come to know God, he can renew our mind. In fact, even give us a new mind. But God is a gentleman. He will never force entry. And then I got to a part in the book where there's a painter has drawn a picture of Jesus knocking at the door, and there's no handle. And it says, the Bible verse it's found in Revelation 3:20, where God says, behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if any man hear my voice and open the door, he says, I'll come in. There's no handle there. And when I saw that picture, I thought, it's me. I'm the one that invites God in. You see, God created man to be a free moral agent, the gift to choose. And in my last lecture this afternoon, I'm going to go into the brain and show you where in the brain we make these decisions. And when I saw that, when I discovered the truth about what happens when you die, I decided to surrender my life to God. So I surrendered my life to God. I didn't really know what was going to happen next, but I said, Father, I want to know you. I want to know you. I started to read the Bible. I started to read Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. There were the stories of Jesus. I didn't get bogged down in the Old Testament of Moses putting his hands up. I started with Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, with the stories of Jesus. I now wanted to know how God views the body. How does God view sickness? What is all that about? Does God want us to go to the doctor and get poisonous drugs when we get sick? And the more I studied, I thought, no, this is not God's ways, because it's about that time I'm also studying the human body, and I love the way God leads us. And I'm sure every person here has got a story about God's leading in their life. Nothing happens by accident. In fact, it's no accident that you are here today, and it's no accident that I'm here today. And I found a verse, and I still claim that verse. It's found in Psalm 32 verse 8, where God says, I will instruct thee and I'll teach you in the way you shall go. I will guide thee with mine eye. So I allowed God to teach me, to guide me. And if someone says to me, you should read this book, I always get the book. And sometimes it's a great book, sometimes it's not a great book. And different people that have come across my path at different times in my life teach me. And I love the song we just had. And I'm sure we can all testify that in some of the hardest things we've been through in our life have been some of our greatest lesson books. They've taken us in pathways we would never have gone if we hadn't gone through that difficult experience. I started to look at all of this through God's eyes. How did I look at it through God's eyes? Through the Bible. And I started to discover so many things. And it wasn't till 6 months ago that I discovered the next verse after I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way that thou shalt go. I will guide thee with my eye. I discovered the next verse where it says, be thou not as the horse or the mule which has no understanding, that needs a bit and a bridle in their mouth. In other words, that God doesn't want us to be as the mule or the horse that needs to be led. And I'd like to suggest that in 2020, the majority of people on planet Earth allowed themselves to be led. So this verse says, be thou not as the horse or the mule which has no understanding, but needs a bit and a bridle in their mouth to lead them. No, God doesn't want that. He gave us a brain to think, to work it out for ourselves. And so as my journey knowing God, my journey knowing the body, my journey of discovery on the body, how it works and how it heals. My first husband unfortunately got very heavily into marijuana. We were living up in a rainforest and it became very difficult. He was having 30 joints of marijuana a day and he became very paranoid. No one could visit us. It got very, very difficult. And then one night, it was a very difficult night for me. He'd come home drunk and he became very threatening, and I realised in the morning I needed to leave. That's very, very hard for a woman to leave her home. Very hard. Always before this I thought, oh, we're about to pick the lettuce. The roses are about to bloom. Where am I going to get 7 beds? Where am I going to get a washing machine? And it just got too difficult. So you just stay a bit longer. But this night was a very difficult night. He'd never been a violent man, but he began to be, and I thought, I've got to go. Anyway, I laid there awake half the night planning what I would do, and I heard him sleep. I heard him slump and sleep in the lounge room, and then I put my plan of action. I thought, it's Sabbath morning, we always go to church, and it was way up, an hour's drive through the rainforest. They have a hall at the church, and it has a kitchen, and they have mattresses. We'll sleep there until I plan my next move. So I told my 3 eldest children, my 3 eldest were 17, 15 and 12, and Jessica was the 12-year-old. I said, we're not coming home, so pack extra clothes. And then the 3 youngest, I said, pack extra clothes because we'll probably go for a walk. Because the next 3 were 10 and 8 and 6. They were the youngest. And so we eventually, we went to church, and I rang up my husband after lunch and said, we're not coming home. He said, please, it'll never happen again. You know, the alcoholic cycle. They're violent and angry at night, and then in the morning, I'm so sorry, but then it happens the next night. And I knew. I grew up in a home where I never heard an angry voice. My parents never drank or smoked. So I knew the signs immediately. And I do know that when people grow up in violent homes, sometimes they'll handle it longer than they really should. So we found a little house to rent, and that was very hard. No one's going to rent to a woman with 6 children. In fact, I'd ring up about a house and they'd say, "How many children do you have?" And I'd go, "6." "How many?" "A few." No, we can't. Anyway, eventually, by God's grace, and I'm so glad that I had come to know God, because God sustained us. He found us a house and about 3 months later I discovered that my first husband had been in some criminal activities and we could never go home. In fact, about a year later I found out that he was now in prison, and I realised my children needed to know that they were free. And so I made the difficult decision to divorce him. I was a single mother for 4 years. And in that time, I was learning more about natural remedies, and I started to give meetings in the afternoon in the church, and I'd use all the children and wrap them up in natural remedies. And they were okay because they were used to that. And then my eldest and also Jessica went to a retreat in Queensland and did massage, started to learn massage, so I moved up there. And I was there 1 year and the business manager asked me to marry him, which was Michael O'Neill. And after a year, he wanted to start his own retreat. So by then, Jessica was, I think, 17. She'd done a massage course. Julia was 15. She was a very good cook. So we had a cook and we had a massage therapist starting a new retreat. And then the 3 boys, who were, I think, 12 and 11 and 10 or something like that, they were our gardeners, because our kids had gardened from a young age. And Michael's daughter, Michaela, she's a very good typist, even though she was 12. She became his secretary. So that's how we were going to start. And I said to Michael, "Who'll be the health director?" He said, "You." I said, No, I'm just a mother. And I think I was 45 at the time. "I'm just a mother and I just help other mothers." He said, "No, you'll be good." And he walked out of the room. I never wanted to be the frontline person. I was just happy to be in the background. I was just happy to help other mothers with sick children, because I've always been very quiet and very shy. But my husband isn't. So I thought, well, looks like this is it, because I know that anything God calls you to do, He will enable you to do it. I felt I was totally underqualified. But Michael told me later that he'd heard some of my health lectures. He said, "I hate health lectures." But he said, "Yours made sense." And I thank my father, who was the inventor, who we were brought up, you've got to know why. And so I always, as you've noticed, weave that into my lectures. And so I thank God that our first health program, we had 1 guest. I could handle that. I could handle one-on-one. And then a couple of weeks later, we had 3 people book in. This starting to get a little bit scary for me. So what Michael would do, he would start the lectures by talking to me and asking me questions. And when he got me talking, he'd slip out the back. And that's how God was teaching me. In fact, I discovered that the guests were the best teachers, because whatever was wrong, and my first lectures were really just the laws of health. That's all I knew. But I knew, of course, a little bit more than I thought I knew. I'd raised all my children with natural remedies, so I'd learnt a lot. And it was probably within 5 years, our retreat now had 18 to 20 guests every week. And we were just a few hours out of Melbourne. It's down the bottom of Australia. And then we moved up to Misty Mountain. And we moved up to Misty Mountain probably 23 years ago now. And then we only had a few guests because we were way up in a rainforest. And Michael noticed that a lot of the guests wanted my lectures, so he started to get people to he got a film crew in to film me giving the lectures. And we did this every couple of years, and then it must have been about 16 years ago, one of the guys that filmed us, he's got a film ministry in Australia called Beyond Patmos. His name's Henry, an Asian man. And when he'd finished filming my lectures, I guess they're about 13 hours of lectures, and of course by now they're a little bit better than when I first started, because I'm an avid reader, and I also did a nutrition course in the middle of that. He said, "These are really interesting. Can I put some little bits of them up on YouTube?" Because YouTube was just starting. Michael said, "Do what you want." And he started to cry, and Michael said, "What's the matter?" He said, "I film people all the time. I film people on Bible studies, on Signs of the Times, on health subjects." He said, "No one's ever given me permission." And Michael said, "Well, it's not our information, it's God's information." 1 year later, we're at a conference, and Henry came running up to us. He was filming at the conference. He said, 1 million heads. He said, "I have never seen that." And I believe that God blessed our ministry, blessed our health retreat, because it's not ours, it's God's. It's God's information. And so as you can see, I can now speak in front of a lot of people. I couldn't have done what I have done this week when I was 45. I don't think I could have even done it at 55. And last year I was at the Ultimate Health Summit. There were 7,000 people there. And so I just get up and speak because I feel a great responsibility to deliver with interest, to deliver accurately. So my mind is on that. My mind is not on what people think, because that's when we say go belly up. And when I'd finished, this 7,000 people stood up. Well, that's very overwhelming for this little lady from the rainforest. And then I walked off the stage, and there were 11 security guys holding the people back, and Ricky's next to me, and I had about 5 around me, and Ricky kept saying, "Barbara, don't look at anyone, just walk." And they whisked me out the back, because if someone says Barbara, I go, "Yes." And that has happened before, and then so I marvel at what God has done in my life. It has not been an easy road. It's been very difficult at sometimes in my life, but I'm very thankful for the way God has led me, and I'm very thankful for the fact that He's never failed me, and I know that He never will. He gives us the choice of faith or fear, and I'm going to explore that in more detail where it happens in our brain this afternoon. But I want to tell you what happened in 2022. In 2022, I was booked for a whole series over 3 months, at speaking at some retreats, at some functions. And in 2022, America would not let anyone unless they had the vaccine pass. Now, Michael had booked all of those events thinking that, the America would have stopped that by now, because America was one of the last to disband this vaccine pass, but the fact is, it was still in place. And Michael said, "I reckon just go." And I did have an exemption from an Irish doctor who said that, Barbara O'Neill's very sensitive to this, and if she's vaccinated, she'll probably die. But I also know that America doesn't have to acknowledge an exemption from an Irish doctor. And Michael tried to book me in online, the flight. The flight was all booked, but it would not let you unless you submitted your vaccine pass. And Michael said, "I think we're going to have trouble. I'm coming with you." So this was our little local small airport. So we walked in, it's called Port Macquarie. So we walked in, and the guy behind the counter, they all know me because I fly so much, he said, "G'day, Barb," because g'day is the way we greet each other. It's Aussie slang for good day, but it's g'day. "G'day, Barb, how you going? You know they've changed your flight." And Michael had all the papers in his hand, and we're talking to him. He said, "Yeah, they've delayed it 2 hours, which means the next flight and the next flight have to be changed." So he's busy working on that. He said, put your bags up." Put my bags up, gave me my boarding pass and said, "Have a good flight." Michael and I are looking at each other. That was it. So I think he just got distracted because, the delay in flight. And then Port Macquarie you go to Sydney, and then Sydney you catch the flight to Dallas, and that's about a 15-hour flight. And Michael said, when you get to Sydney, don't go through the usual channels where they require, your passport. Go round the other way. We catch a train there physically and do it, something like that. So I did. And just before, I found out I got to upgrade to business class. And when it's business class, it's almost, come through, and I smile. And these poor people, they get yelled at so much that they love you when you smile. So I came up with a great big smile on my face, looked them straight in the eye. Here's my passport. They smile and didn't even ask for the vaccine pass. So I'm on the plane to America now. Anyway, about to land, and it came over the speaker. You have to go through immigration. You will have to show your vaccine pass, have your vaccine pass, and have your passport ready. Fear rises up. At that point we have a decision. We can go to fear or faith. And I thought, they're not going to shoot me. They're not going to torture me. They're just going to send me home. Don't worry about it. And I'll explore this in more detail this afternoon, but at every point we have a choice. That's why my book says many might be well if only they thought so. So I have control over my thoughts. So I'm not going to go to the fear, I'm going to go to the faith. Okay, if they say I've got to go home, I can handle that. So I come up to immigration, and the guy two in front of me, because I'm a very fast walker, it helps to keep fit, because you can get ahead of everyone. I say to Jess when we're walking, overtaking. We do the overtaking a lot. Anyway. So there's only two in front of me, and I could hear the immigration guy saying, "What's your reason for coming? Where are you staying? Where's your vaccine pass?" They just drill you like that. And the man's trying to find his papers. And once again, the flutter of fear comes up, but once again I make a decision. No, not going to take that on. And then the guy next to me opens his and calls me over. So I go over and put my passport down. He says, "What's your reason for coming to the US?" "I've got a daughter who lives in the US and she's got 7 children. Now her eldest child, his wife's just had the first baby. So this is my first grandchild." Poor guy didn't quite know what to do. Stamped my passport and said, "Have a good trip." Did not even ask for my vaccine pass. So I'm in. And I'm texting Michael and I said, "I'm in." I'm in. So Michael immediately texts all the other people who are desperately waiting. They got people booked in. Is she going to get in? And he said, "She's in. She's in." Thank you, Father in heaven. It is amazing the way that God works. We can never underestimate what God can do. But you know what he asks us to do? He asks us to keep going. We've got to go. Anyway, 2 days later, I'm speaking in front of 500 people. It was in a church. And we had question and answer. And one of the questions, the lady said, "How'd you get into the US?" And my husband had said, "Don't tell the story or the authorities might come and deport you." And I said, "God is good. Next question." And so that's how I got in. And there's a verse in the Bible, another verse, and it's found in 1 Corinthians 3:18. It says, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells in you. And if any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. Now this takes the body to even an higher level. But if any man defile, I have made a decision that I will not defile my body. And when I look at what's in that vaccine, no thank you. No, I will not take that. But I do know that many were blackmailed into having that vaccine. So I'm very happy for Dr. Peter McCulloch, who has put a program together to help the body cope with this shot. So as I went through my journey, more and more I discovered what an incredible body we have with its inbuilt ability to heal itself. This is the 6th year where I've travelled 9 months of the year. People say to me, don't you miss your home? I don't even think about it. I just love where I am. And I have to tell you, you southern people have made us feel very much at home. So thank you very much. And the beauty of this is that God has given us each other. And people say, when are you going to stop? I say, I don't know. God knows. So when Michael said to me, when the message came through that I was banned, I had a life ban. Apparently I'm a threat to public safety. I'll leave that up to your assessment there. I think I'm a threat to the future of the pharmaceutical company, but who am I? I'm just a little old lady from the rainforest. And when people say, who are you? I say, well, look, I'm just actually a nobody. I'm just a little mother from the rainforest that didn't want to give my children drugs. That's all. I'm just another lady. And I know that if God can use me, he can use you. And so when I got the life ban, I cried. I mourned the loss because I've only ever wanted to help people. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it says there's a time to mourn and there's a time to laugh. There's a time to weep and a time to dance. Well, I mourned. I allowed myself about 15 minutes and then I thought, I wonder what God's got in store for me now. I had no idea. I had no idea what God had in store for me. In fact, if you'd told me, I wouldn't have believed it. So when I went home, because I was in Fiji when I got the news, Michael said, well, what do you want to do? He said, you can retire because you're retirement age, or we can go to court. Well, that was a little scary for me. I think those lawyers would chew me up and spit me out. Michael, he always defends himself in court. Nothing, he's not afraid of nothing. And he said, if it was me, I'd go to court. But he said, I can understand you don't really want to go to court. And we had a lawyer friend say, you could be in court for years and you could lose all your money and the only people that'll benefit is the lawyers. So Michael said, you can retire or we can take it to court or you can go overseas. I said, I'll go overseas because I've never had so much information in my brain. I've never had so much experience to share and I still feel great. I'm booked out next year, but 2028, we're maybe back off a little bit. And that'll be the year I turn 75. And a friend said to me, you're not going to use that as an excuse, are you? And so I've given you a really short version of my life. And I have given it to you in the aim that it may inspire you, that no matter who you are, no matter what you do, that God has a plan for you and you are able to be the captain of your ship, the master of your destiny, because it's your God-given right. It's your God-given right to choose what you do and what you do not do to your body. So I'd like to close with a word of prayer before we meet again later this afternoon. Father in heaven, thank you so much for who you are, what you are, and the plans that you have for each one of us. And we know that the plans that you have for us are plans of peace, because Jesus said that he came to give us life. And not only give us life, but that we might have life more abundantly. So thank you for teaching us, thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for what you have promised to do in us. We thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd rather have Jesus than silver or gold. I'd rather be His than have riches untold. I'd rather have Jesus than houses or land. I'd rather be led by His nail-pierced hand. I'd rather have Jesus than men's applause. I'd rather be faithful to His dear cause. I'd rather have Jesus than worldwide fame. I'd rather be true to His holy name than to be the king of a vast domain, or be out in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. He's fairer than lilies of rarest bloom. He's sweeter than honey from out the comb. He's all that my hungering spirit needs. I'd rather have Jesus and let Him lead than to be the king of a vast domain, or be out in sin's dread sway. I'd rather have Jesus than anything this world affords today. This world affords today.
Thank you, Emily and Jolie and Douglas earlier. We'll see you at 5:15, Rewiring the Mind. Have a good afternoon. We hope to see you back.